Hello, good afternoon. Let's start. Talking to people after the class last time. Hello, am I on there? Hello? Talking to people after class last time, two things became apparent to me. One is that the essay is coming up, and I guess most of you guys are thinking practically about what on earth am I going to write for this essay? Is that a reasonable question to have at this point? And the other is that we've covered a lot of remarkably confusing material very fast. That's my impression. Is that your impression, or has it been boringly slow? Or put up your hand if it's been boringly slow. Okay, well that was all right. That's fairly clear. So I thought also today I might try and review stuff a little bit, but the point of my review is not so much to. The point of my review is more to give you a peg to hang questions on. So if there's stuff that's been confusing you the whole way through, I really hope you'll feel free to raise questions and so on. So I hope this will be a bit more interactive. These lectures are what in the trade they call heroic lectures, and it's not at all clear that that's pedagogically very good, but it's difficult to do it any other way in this kind of structure. So we might try and loosen it a little bit today and see how it goes. So remember that on your essay you're going to have to state the main thesis for which you're going to argue, and then explain how you've been arguing for it. So what I thought I might do later on in today's session is pick on people, call on people, particularly people who don't usually raise a whole bunch of questions, and just find out what people are thinking of as the thesis that they might want to argue for, mainly because it would be interesting, but also to start thinking about what you'd actually do in working through one of these essays. Okay, is that a plan? Okay, so let's start out with dualism, and the idea of different levels. It's often said that, either mind and body are distinct, or at any rate, when you describe a person in terms of their brain and behavior and so on, when you describe them physically, when you describe them scientifically, the mind and the brain are descriptions of the person at different levels. I mean, whatever exactly that means. And the way we came into that was through this contrast between imaginative understanding of other people and scientific explanation of what's going on with people. So imaginative understanding seems really important when you're interacting with other people, when you're evaluating other people, when you're saying, was he being mean to me? Was he trying to get at me when he said that? When you're thinking like that, you're trying to get inside the other person's head. What was in their mind? You get at that by putting yourself in their shoes. And if you're making plans for your future life, that kind of imaginative understanding seems really important too. When you think, well, what it will be? Suppose I go on to work as a lawyer, for example. What will that be like? Will I like it? Will it be fun? Or if you're trying to remember what life was like when you were 6, then what you're trying to do is recover the feel of life then. That kind of imaginative understanding seems really important in everyday life for your moral assessment of other people, or just knowing how to get on with them, and for thinking about your own plans. And it seems different to scientific explanations of what people are doing in terms of laws governing their brains, laws governing their behavior, associative conditioning governing the way behavior responds to rewards, that kind of thing, or, as we were talking about, functional organization. So let me just ask you at this stage, is that pretty clear, that distinction between two ways of understanding, two ways of comprehending what's going on with people? Put up your hand if that's plain as day. You're pretty sure you have that, what that means at this point. And if you don't? And if you don't understand the question? Okay, good. So we had these three examples that really seem to write up the distinction large. But the initial point of these examples is to make this distinction inescapable. When you've got the bat, you can have a complete scientific understanding of the bat. Science could study the bat forever without humans ever being able to get an imaginative understanding of what the bat's mental life is like. You could study bat sonar forever without being able to imagine or visualize or whatever the word would be, sonarize what it's like being a bat. Yeah? That seems unmistakable at this point. And similarly with the split brain patient, we understand in many ways what's going on with split brain patients perfectly well. It's not that difficult a phenomenon. I mean, the details are very interesting and the details are very puzzling, but they can be figured out. But imagining what's going on in the mind of a split brain patient when they look at a visual display seems almost impossible. Or Jackson's Mary makes the same point in a different way, that Mary can have complete scientific knowledge of the world around her, but she doesn't know what it's like to see the colours. She can't imagine seeing the colours. So scientific explanation could be complete without you having the slightest idea what's going on when someone sees the colours, or what's going on in the mind of the split brain patient, or what's going on with the bat. So I have a question for you at this point. When we've got that distinction between imaginative understanding and scientific explanation, so a natural question to raise right here is, are these different ways of comprehending the same thing? And is there just one thing here, the person, and you get two different ways of getting at it, namely via imaginative understanding or via scientific explanation? Or is it that there are two different things here? There's the soul on the one hand, and you get at that by way of the imagination. And then there's the body, and you get at that by way of science. These are two different pictures of what's going on. So let me just ask you, I mean, please don't be shy about that. I wish we had clickers, actually. Next time I do this class, I'm definitely going to do clickers. But although it's not anonymous, there is no shame. I mean, there's no shame attached to giving any one answer rather than another. So please do not be risk-averse about this. What do you think? Is it one and the same thing, the person being understood, as we say, at different levels when you talk about imaginative understanding? Put up your hand if you think... do you have a question?
No, I think yes.
Okay, put up your hand if you... follow his lead. Put up your hand if you think the answer is yes. Is one and the same thing being understood at different levels, now by imagination, now by science? Okay, and if you think that's not the right answer? Okay, so I'd put that at a slight majority of yes to no. Any questions about that? Any comments? If you didn't vote there, then I'm really curious why not. What's your gut? Yes?
I wasn't sure because I didn't know how we were defining person.
Okay, I wasn't defining it. That is part of my art, right? But if you're cagey about person, then for present purposes, we could say human being. Right, the unit, right, this, I don't know what to say, here I stand, right? If it says no more than 9 people in the elevator at any one time, right, that notion of person, well, yeah. If it says no more than 120 people in the room because of fire regulations, however you count people there, right? Yeah, biological comes psychological unit. Okay? Do you want me to take the vote again? No, that's I don't know if you'd call that clarifying, but okay. So let's do that again. If the answer is yes, is the one thing, the person, there's just one thing, just in the sense that you'd count all of us and say and use names like you say, Jacinta is a great athlete and a brilliant mathematician. You see what I mean? That's the mind and the body, but you don't say, well, there's two different things there, colloquially. It's just one thing. Yeah. So if the answer is yes, and if the answer is no, for some reason the no vote's gone way down after that. Okay, so let me just frame that a different way. If you've got imagination and you've got scientific explanation, then are there two different things there? The body and the soul. The body being understood scientifically, the soul being understood by way of the imagination, and they're being understood in different ways. So there's two different objects, not just one thing here, but there are two different things. Yeah. Put up your hand if you think that's the right description. Yes. Some of you are voting for both. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think, are you saying that in this example, the soul and the body are like completely separate?
They're completely separate. I mean, they may be influencing one another, but they're just different things. Yeah. Yes?
So if one were to answer no to this question just because they don't believe that the body is I would say no, just because I don't think that they would be two separate things, but if my answer no might be interpreted as me saying that they cannot be compensated in different ways.
That's really good. It's very natural to say that, but I don't see how it can be right. Yeah, because if there's only one thing there, then it must be one thing being comprehended in different ways. Yeah, it can't. You can't have it both ways. Yeah, this is really a crux. This is very important actually in how you think about the whole issue. Yeah. So, but it's clear what the suggestion is: body and soul, two different objects. The reason it's imaginations versus science is imagination is appropriate to the soul, science is appropriate to the body. Can you put up your hand if you think that's the right answer? If that's yes. Hi. Hi. Okay, and if you think the answer is okay, it's about 3 or 4, and if you think the answer is no. I really don't understand why people are abstaining. Why? Anyone who abstained wants to... I mean, is it that you don't believe either of them, or you believe some third option? Yes?
Yeah, I think there could be many more different kinds.
Yeah, all right, there might be 3 or more. That's fair enough. Philosophers find it very hard to deal with more than 2. But you're right, there's no real reason there shouldn't be many more. Yeah, so I agree that's not ruled out. Yes?
Just a question. So it would be compatible with thinking that you're talking about the person, either through imagination and science, while thinking that our psychological states are more than just brain processes or behavior, for example.
Yes, that's right. That's right. I'll come on to that in a second, but that's right. Yeah, that's very important. So is it clear what I was saying? Well, let me play back to you what I think you're saying. That you could say there's just one thing here being understood in 2 different ways, while also thinking that there's more to your psychology than just brain processes. Yeah? Okay, so with that clarified, would that harden up the vote for 1? Yes, right, we get room for his vote anyway. Right. And yours. Or do you have a question? Okay. Any other comments in this way of framing things? Is this reasonably clear at this point? Yeah. Yeah, the soul would be the same thing as the mind, and it would be different to the body. Does it seem to you obvious that that's correct? No. No, okay. Aha. Okay, this goes back to the thing, there might be 3 or more things here, right? And I agree that once you get into the groove here of drawing distinctions, you could say, well, why don't we have 3 things, the soul, the mind, and the body? For our purposes, I like it as simple as possible. I personally find this stuff extremely confusing. So if there's a mind and a soul, okay, we just lump them together for present purposes. They're not the body, that's the great thing. You see what I mean? Yeah. Okay. Now, I think the reason most people have said no to this, I would guess that this is part of the reason people in the class are saying no, is suppose you've got 2 things, the soul and the body. Well, let's take them one at a time. Suppose you've got the soul. if you've got the soul, then you can have imaginative understanding of it. But are you going to be able to have scientific understanding of it too? I mean, that really seems weird. Because on the one hand, you have no idea how to do a scientific study of the soul if it's different to the body and the brain and so on. And on the other hand, how could there be a part of the world that is outside the scope of science? That hardly seems to make sense. Yeah? I mean, science studies everything. You show scientists anything, and they're keen to study it. Dark matter, dark energy. You show them stuff that isn't made of atoms, they'd say, great, let's measure it. So that is very hard to understand. And on the other hand, suppose souls were eliminated. Suppose I got an app on my phone. Let me just try and see if I can do this right now. And, well, I'm not sure I can do this right now. Let me see if I can do this. It's not very easy, but, okay, you can try this at home, actually. Okay, where are we? Yeah. So I take this across the first row here, right? And I selectively remove consciousness, but I leave everybody physically untouched. So I removed your souls. Okay, and this is only temporary, right? Now, notice that everybody kind of behaves the same way as before, though the soul has been removed. But of course, that is only what you'd expect. I mean, this is kind of just between us, right? The guys in the front row don't know about this. Of course they're going to act just as before, because they're physically exactly the same. They're subject to exactly the same laws. Yeah? So if we don't return their souls, they're still going to be moving and acting and behaving just the way they ordinarily would. So if you want to interact with them, then you'll really need to use your imaginative understanding. That'll be, in practice, the only way you have of explaining and predicting what they're doing. Because you can't, although what's going on is you've got purely physical organisms here just running along at a deterministic level, then the only way you can't deal with that physics directly, it's too complex. So you'll have to use imaginative understanding. So you'll have to use imaginative understanding and scientific explanation for these guys anyhow, even if there's only a body here. Actually, before I forget, yeah. Let me just... Okay. Oh, that's better, isn't it? Right, okay. Okay. So, I think it's... Okay. Don't say we don't do practical demonstrations in this class yet. Good. Right. Yes? Yes, because if you think about it, the physical body is made of atoms, right? The physical body is just part of the physical universe. It's governed by the same laws as any other part of the physical universe. Yeah? So, if your body is left intact with no soul, then it's the same atoms operating, governed by the same laws as before. So it's going to move and act just in the same way as before. Why would it be any different? Sorry, yes. Carry on.
I don't know. I feel like there's not really proof to say whether or not, like, any random person in the front row has the soul, or maybe they're operating without the soul right now. I feel like it's too...
That's right. Well, I
feel like it's impossible to say that, yeah, they would go on the exact same if they had no soul right now, if you were to speak it out.
But that would mean that physics wasn't true. Surely physics is true. You see what I mean? I mean, it would be like saying, I got a table of billiard balls here. I shoot the cue. They're all governed by those laws of physics. And it doesn't really matter what other entities are around in the vicinity. So if you've got a collection of cells here, if you don't mind me referring to you as a collection of cells, if you've got a collection of cells here, then that's governed by the laws of physics, by the laws of biology. So how could it not just carry on behaving in the same way as before?
But if we were to take out the soul and soul would operate the same exact way, then why do we even care if we have souls?
Exactly. That's what I mean. I mean to be saying, suppose you took away the soul, everything would just be going on the same way as before. So you'd still want these levels of imaginative understanding and scientific explanation. Yes?
Are you saying that's true, or are you just using that as a possibility?
I'm using that as an argument against talking about mind and soul as different. Yeah. If you hypothesize a soul, and then you say, okay, so let's subtract it, and then you're left with this incredibly complex physical organism, it's still going to look, act, and behave exactly like someone who's got an ordinary psychological states. You're going to react to it exactly like you would with someone with ordinary psychological states. Yeah?
Yeah, I just don't believe that's true, because I believe your soul is where probably a lot of your values and all that are held, and in order to be able to think the same and communicate the same, you have to have those same values and
right.
Part of that program is your soul.
That might well be true, but suppose you subtracted the soul, you'd be left with a physical organism that still acted as if it had values. You see what I mean? It might not really have values, but it'd be acting as if it had values, and to interact with it, you want to know what values appeared to have been programmed into it. And that's really just a roundabout way of saying the soul isn't making any difference to what happens. Postulate the soul, and it turns out to be idle. You see what I mean? And you're left with these same puzzles about the body as you had originally. What's the relation between my imaginative understanding of this thing and my understanding of it scientifically? Yes?
I don't understand how you could have an imaginative understanding of something that doesn't have a conscious experience. How do you have I feel like when you remove the soul, you remove any level of consciousness. So you don't have any conscious experience anymore. There's nothing that it's like to be that.
Yes,
person,
very good.
that body.
Very good. Okay.
So how do you imagine something
Yeah.
that's not there?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's imagining being an inanimate object is how I would imagine that.
That's right. Yeah, imagine being a mountain or all that snow on top of you. Yeah.
How is an imaginative understanding useful?
Yes. Right. Very good. Well, you can imagine Martians who are just... Martians are very, very smart, right? Everybody knows that. That's and they can look on human beings as physical systems at a glance, and they can just predict what this physical system is going to do. Yeah? Martians are kind of like that. They just know a whole lot about physics. They know a whole lot about human biology. They know a whole lot about biology. And they can scan you and just at a glance predict what you're going to do. Yeah? But it might never have occurred to Martians that people are conscious. They say to them, no, they're too small and squashy. They're not proper big, gigantic stone things like us. They couldn't be conscious, those funny little things. So they can predict everything that we do. Yeah. But now consider you or I. You or I suppose we weren't conscious. We're still very complex physical organisms, but we're not like the Martians. We're not smart enough to do all those calculations about each other's behavior in real time. Or if you just think about your interactions with a dog or a cat, is the dog or the cat conscious? Well, does it have a soul? Well, I don't know, but if you're going to interact with a dog or a cat, if you're going to train the dog or do your best to get the cat to do what you want it to do, then what you do is you act as if it had a mind. You act as if you know what it wants, what it's trying to do, what it likes, what it doesn't like. Right? I mean, anyone here got a dog or a cat? Right, that's what you do, right? You don't deal with it directly at the level of physics or biology. We're not smart enough to do the physics of each other directly. So if we were going to deal with such complex organisms as one another in a purely physical world with no psychology, we'd still have to imagine there was a psychology, because that's the only rough way we have of predicting one another's behavior. You see what I mean? It's sometimes said about autistic children that they don't understand the concept of other minds, that they don't know what's going on with other people's minds, and that for that reason, other people are just scary. They're completely unpredictable. Unless you can think in terms of minds, you have no way of predicting what this object is going to do. These things lumber around in ways that have no rhyme or reason unless you suppose them to have minds. So even if you had these complex physical organisms with no souls, you'd still need to use imagination as your abacus, as your sketch pad, as your convenient way for predicting what people are going to do. That was my point. I hope I'm making things clearer. Yeah.
I understand what you're trying to say, that the person, like if you were to take out my soul, the person, like some other person to interact with me would be imaginative understanding.
Mm-hmm.
But how would I be able to interact with the other person? Since, like,
How would you be able to interact with the other person?
because, like the soul and the mind are supposed to be like lumped together in this scenario. So
That's right.
how am I supposed to have an understanding of the other person if I don't have a soul or not?
That's right. This is what I mean. If you subtracted the soul, the only way it would still be true that the only way we'd have of negotiating with one another would be by imaginative understanding. So even if you suppose there's only a body here and subtract the soul, you will still have to use imaginative understanding. What I was saying here was, if you said there's a separate soul, you're still going to want to apply the methods of science to it. And what I'm saying here is, if you say there's a body separate from the soul, you're still going to want to apply imaginative understanding to it, because that's your only way of getting at how it's going to behave.
Yeah, but I wouldn't have a mind to be able to apply that.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yes, right. Yes, very good. Yes, that's true, isn't it? I mean, you guys would really be in trouble. Yeah, but the only way it would work is if you could act as if you had minds. Yeah, but here I'm not thinking about you guys. I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, as you were a moment ago, right? Here I'm just thinking of you as a targets of understanding. Yeah. So my general, yeah, Connie. Yes, please. Yes. Yeah.
What if you believed in some type of dualism where you didn't assume behavior necessarily came from the scientific part, like other people were saying, so much was dependent on your personal experience?
Yes.
Subjective things.
Right.
That if you took away the mind or the soul, that you'd be left kind of in a zombie, and that physically would be different than how you engage with.
Right. So if I hadn't returned our souls to these guys, then at the end of lecture they would still be staring glassily in front of them. That would be the idea. They'd behave differently. Yeah. For that to be true, it would have to be true that the physics of the physical universe isn't the whole story. What I mean is, if you're looking at a billiard table, if you're a physicist looking at a billiard table, then the movements of the balls all affect one another. Then now and then a jolt comes from outside the system. You see what I mean? The cue shot comes from outside the system and gets things moving. And the cue shot's not part of the physical system. But physicists think that the universe itself, I mean the whole total universe since the Big Bang, that's a unity. I mean, there's nothing coming from outside that. But if that picture that you're giving, which I agree is a natural one, if you're a dualist, that the mind, the brain is a kind of a collection of billiard balls, and the mind kind of comes from outside the system now and then and puts a cue shot in, yeah? Then looking at the physics of the brain, you should be able to see that happening. You should be able to see a collection of neurons where they're not firing at all. They're just sitting there, and then suddenly, whomp, they all spark into action. And you look for the physical reason for that. And you say, well, there is no physical reason for that. That was the ectoplasm acting. That was the mind coming in and zapping the brain. Yeah, but that never happens. I mean, not half a mile from here, there are hundreds of people who spend their entire lives looking at bits of brain. That phenomenon has never, ever been observed. Yeah, the brain is completely comprehensible as a physical system in its own right. You just don't see these jolts of energy coming from outside the system and sparking it into activity. Yep.
Yeah, so just to clarify, we are equating the mind with the soul, but not the mind and the brain. Right?
That's right. That's right. I was suggesting provisionally, suppose you separate these two, the soul or the mind on the one hand, and the body on the other. The distinction is actually artificial. It doesn't really make sense. Because the root distinction is this one between imaginative understanding and scientific explanation. That's the important distinction. That seems completely real. That's what I think we began by saying we're all on the same page with. Most of us anyway. And then if you say, so there are two different objects, the body and the soul, then things start to go wrong. Yeah, then you get all these puzzles that I've been raising.
Right. I just mean that the mind and the soul are being equated here, but not the mind and the brain. The brain is still like the physical entity that's governed by physical laws.
That's the hypothesis I'm considering, yeah. And what I'm saying is that doesn't make sense.
Okay.
So, because if you say the mind or soul on the one hand and the body or the brain on the other hand are two different things, two different objects, yeah, then you face the question, am I going to be able to give scientific explanations of the soul, of the mind? And then you have no idea where to begin, because science really seems to need to work with the brain or the body or something like that, the behavior, as its material. And if you say, no, that's not what I'm talking about, how could you scientifically study ectoplasm? How would you go about it? You have no idea how you'd go about it. And the other thing I was saying is, if you had only a body, if you think only of the complex body, then in order to negotiate with such a complex physical system, you're actually going to want to use imaginative understanding anyhow.
But the example that you gave about how if it were to be the end of class and then the people without souls would just stay put and look vastly over at you, wouldn't our brain function where it registers like the word end of class and then synapses fire and whatever happens and then we stand up and exit the classroom without the mind having to be there?
That's right. That's right, and that's what I'm saying actually happens. I mean, if the other hypothesis were right, then, there's a Nobel Prize for anyone who manages to do the following. You put some imaging apparatus on top of someone in the class, yeah? And then, when it comes time for them to leave, you see a group of neurons in the motor cortex suddenly getting fired up, and there's no physical cause, because that was the soul. That was his whole bringing its cue shot in from outside the system and firing up the neurons. You never see that. Every time you see neurons firing, you look at other neurons connected to it, and they made those ones fire. Yeah? It should be possible, if this hypothesis was right, to put a brain under investigation and see where the external shot hits from the soul came in. But that just doesn't happen. It would be great if it did. It would be wonderful if it did, but no one's ever seen that. Someone had a hand up. Yeah. So you haven't asked a question yet. Yeah.
Okay. So are you saying by this that every behavioral output is the result of like a physical stimulus?
That's right. Every behavioral output is a result of a physical stimulus. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, the physical is a closed system, as people sometimes say. Another way people sometimes put it is that there are laws of the conservation of energy. That if the soul was really coming from outside, energy wouldn't be conserved. Energy should sometimes leak off into your soul from the physical, or suddenly come into the physical from the mental. But that doesn't happen.
By this logic, is it really anyway, like we're proving that and there's no interaction?
That's right. That's what I'm saying. That's my point. No, how could you? Right? It doesn't make any, I mean, you hypothesize them as separate, and then it turns out if you subtract them, it doesn't make any difference. Yeah.
If the mind is not supposed to be a physical object, then why would we expect that there will be a physical sign that it exists?
If the mind is not a physical object, then there should be no physical sign that it exists. That's right. That's right. So let's just take that. There's no physical reason to suppose the mind exists. Yeah? Okay. But then there's just no reason to suppose the mind exists at all. I mean, what would be the non-physical reason be?
I don't know, like a religious belief?
A religious belief. Oh, it would be religious beliefs are usually said to be based on faith rather than evidence. Yeah. So there's no evidence for the existence of the mind.
Yes, I'm not arguing that it should have evidence in the brain. I'm saying
Yeah.
if the mind is not physical, then there should be no physical evidence in your brain.
No, that's an important suggestion. No, that's a very good suggestion. Yeah. It would be that just as you can have the attitude to the world of a religious believer, you can have the attitude to the world of a believer in minds. And this is not something rationally grounded. This is a matter of faith. That's the suggestion. Yeah. I think that's quite a good suggestion. Yeah. But if you think of it like that, you can make the same points about religion. I don't want to trample on anyone's sensibilities here too much, but you can make the same remarks about religion as you can about the mind, as I'm making here. That one picture of what's going on if you're religious is that there's a separate realm out there that is not the usual earthly one, yeah, where various supernatural beings exist. And that would be like dualism. And that's usually taken to be not really what the religious believe, well, often, and people I talk to anyway, taken to be not quite the picture the religious believer wants. It's not that there's a kind of paranormal realm out there that physicists could study. They could say, what are angels? Yeah? What are junior gods? What are they made of? These are meant to be bad questions. I mean, nobody truly religious really takes that seriously. Nobody's a strong word. Religious people don't usually take that kind of question seriously. What are the angels made of? What kind of energy do they have? What are the laws governing their behavior? Yeah. So we need some different picture of what their motive, what it means to say these things exist. And another, if you just follow that logic, what I'd be arguing here is that if you're going to understand the world religiously, don't think of it as two different things, a realm here and something over there that also has characteristics that can be studied by science. Think of it as a single realm that you are understanding in two different ways. Indeed, you could think of the religious impulse as an extension of our imaginative understanding of other people. Okay. So, I just say that to suggest that it's not that I wish to push any particular religious views down your throat. It's just, I think a lot of the same issues come up in connection with religion as are coming up here. Yeah. And so without wanting to simplify it very much, I don't know that it helps to connect it to religion because it's the same set of questions. Yeah. Okay. Anything else on this? Is this all? Are you reasonably comfortable with this? Put up your hand if you're reasonably comfortable with this. Okay. Okay. Actually, I've only just begun on the stuff I was going to, but it just occurs to me that if I carry on, we won't get to hear what people are thinking of doing for the essay. So this has just been a preliminary thing over the distinction between thinking in terms of imaginative understanding versus scientific explanation. Is there one object or two? And the idea that there's just one object with different ways of understanding it, imaginatively or scientifically. That's kind of the background to a lot of what we do. Because once you get to the point where you say, there's just one thing here that we're understanding in two different ways, there's just one thing here, the person, that we're understanding in two different ways, then all the theories that we've been looking at, behaviorism, central state materialism, functionalism, and so on, all those theories are ways of trying to understand how these two levels of comprehension are connected, what the relation is between them. But how would you like to proceed? I could carry on for a bit. I would be more interested in hearing what people are planning to do in their essays. What would you like to do? One possibility is we could do something about the essays on Wednesday. If you don't much care. Would you like to do something practical? Yeah, let me just ask you. We could do a practical session about how to write the essays on Wednesday. Would that be a good idea? Yes. Oh, okay. Okay. Well, this will have to be highly interactive. Okay, so it will be particularly important that you come to class on Wednesday with some suggestions to what you want to argue for anyhow in your essay, and some questions about it. Yeah. And I think the GSIs can do a kind of something together on that. Is that the way to do it? Is that the way to go on Wednesday? Yeah. Okay. So Wednesday will be a practical session on essay writing. Okay. Any other questions about what we've done so far? Okay. Well, in that case, just for the last few minutes today, I will maybe blast through, trying to say how what the other stuff we've been doing connects to this general frame. So, Descartes was trying to give an argument, a further argument that soul and body must be distinct, right? Descartes was trying to argue that after all, despite what I've just been saying, soul and body must be distinct, because the certainty with which you know of your own existence is greater than the certainty of your knowledge of any physical thing. If you say that there's some supremely powerful and malicious deceiver, then you don't know about the existence of anything physical, but you do know about your own existence. And your own existence, therefore, can only be a matter of thinking. Thinking must be something different to the physical. That was Descartes' first argument. I'm just curious, what do you guys think? Does that work, that argument? Does that show that body and soul are distinct? Can you put your hand up if the answer is yes? It does show that body and soul are distinct. And if it doesn't, these are the only options. Right? Yeah. Let me do that again. Look, if you think with a probability of more than 50.5% that this shows that soul and body are distinct, put your hand up. And if you think with a probability of more than 50.5% that this shows that body and soul, this does not show that body and soul are distinct, put your hand up. Okay. Yes?
Are you saying that it proves that, or that to us, or that it asserts it?
It proves it to us.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay, there's a reasonable split. The class is not split. Let's just try this before we leave. There's one person on either side of you, for most of you, right? Take one or the other or both of the people on either side of you. In many cases, that'll be someone who had a different view to yours, and explain why you think what you think about this. Can we do that for the next 2 minutes? Take 2 minutes, turn to the person on one or the other side of you, say, I'm whatever your name is, tell them your name, and explain why you think what you do about this, and then we'll take another vote and see what you think. Okay, so take 2 minutes. Okay. Okay, can we take another vote? If at this point you think soul and body are, the argument does show that soul and body are distinct, can you put up your hand? And if you think it doesn't show that soul and body are distinct? Okay, so it's switched. It's more in favour of thinking it does. Okay. Any comments on this? Why did some of you change your minds? No? Okay. Why did anyone change their mind? And let me put it another way. The majority of you think that this shows that soul and body are distinct. Right? That's right. But we were just arguing, and I thought most of you agreed, that imaginative understanding and scientific understanding are targeted in the same thing. Yeah? As soul and body are distinct, you've got to admit that the soul is something which, if you subtract it from the body, it makes no difference to how the body behaves. And you're still going to want to understand the body imaginatively. So there's no point in thinking of soul and body as distinct. That's right, isn't it? There's no point in thinking of soul and body as distinct, because suppose you start out with the idea that they're distinct, and then you imagine subtracting the soul from the body. That makes no difference to what happens. The soul turns out to be not making any difference to what goes on. Yeah? That's right, but I'm saying if you subtracted them, they're not working together, and you can see that because the physics of the brain doesn't involve any input from outside the physical world. Yeah? So they're not working together. You wouldn't be the same person. Your body would move and act in exactly the same ways. No one could tell the difference. Well, they need to predict what you're going to do. That was the argument. Yeah. Yes. Sorry. Yes.
If they're distinct, then can the soul exist without a body?
That would be follow. Yes. If they're really distinct. Yeah.
How?
Yeah. I mean, that's a good question. Look. I have here a simple phone, and I have here a simple bit of paper. They're distinct existences, right? Therefore, one can exist without the other. I destroy the piece of paper. Here is the phone, right? If you've got mind and body, yeah, if they're really different, then you could destroy the body and the mind would carry on. You could destroy the mind and the body would carry on. Yeah? Okay. Yes?
Well, I had a question. First, say the phone and the paper thing. Say that your phone has two kind of distinct aspects of being a phone to it. It has the metal, the plastic, the screen, that constitutes
Yeah.
it, and then it has part of the phone that carries out the function.
Okay, yes.
Drop it in the toilet or whatever.
Yeah. Right.
Metal, plastic, glass are all still there.
Right.
But is it still even a phone?
Okay, I'm sympathetic to the idea that this thing isn't even a phone. It is an X-phone. It is a former phone. Yeah. Yeah, but you had to destroy some of the bits there. Okay, last question.
Yeah, because I just phone and I destroyed the
Okay. So just one last framing remark. If you take it, most of the literature that we're looking at just takes it. There's only one thing there, the person, and it's understood in two different ways. And then it's all about how those two ways of understanding the thing are related to one another. So the idea is that imagining what's going on in someone's mind and describing them scientifically, they just must be getting at the same bit of reality in different ways. And then the puzzle that all these theories are addressing is, how can that be? What's the relation between the stuff you think of imaginatively and the stuff you think of scientifically? How are these connected? That's just a frame where behaviorism and central state materialism and functionalism all come in. Okay, essays on Wednesday. Thanks, guys.